Hello guys, okay, so today I'm going to do a review of the Breath of the Wild DLC, the Trial of the Sword and the Champions Ballad. So I'm going to do a review of both of them. So let's start off with the Trial of the Sword because that's the first one. So the Trial of the Sword. So how it begins is you get a message from Zelda to go back to the Lost Woods and place the sword back in the pedestal where you found it. When you do that, the Trial of the Sword begins. So the Trial of the Sword has three stages: a beginning, middle, and a final stage. Each stage you complete increases the power of the Master Sword. Before you complete the trials, you don't have the full power of the Master Sword. You have to go through the Trial of the Sword in order to prove yourself worthy of using the full power of the Master Sword. So each trial you complete, beginning, middle, and the final trial, will increase the Master Sword's power until you complete the final trial, which will give you the full power of the Master Sword. Usually before the trials, the Master Sword's power isn't fully activated until you're in Hyrule Castle, where Ganon is and where all the malice is. That's when the blade lights up and it's blue and it's at full power. It's at 60. You can see the stats. Before you're in Hyrule Castle, it's 30. Now when you go into Hyrule Castle, it's 60. Because it's powering up because all the malice is there. But anyway, when you do the Trial of the Sword, you have to go through certain stages. The beginning stage, I believe, is 6 stages. Middle stage is 12. And I believe the final stage is like 23. 23 or 24. Each of these stages has a rest area. So the beginning stage will only have 1. Middle stage 2. Final stage 3, and that's included within your 23 stages. So my advice: when you do the Trial of the Sword, you have to think outside the box. You have to be a more strategic fighter, because when you begin the trials, you lose all your armor, you lose all your weapons. You can't take any of that with you. I do dislike that though, because if you're like me and you were nearly a completionist in the game, you can find it insulting that when you do the Trial of the Sword, the monks say you have to do these trials without the armor and weapons you've collected on the way. You can't rely on them. It's not as if I had to work and put hours into upgrading my armor and finding all these resources, ingredients, and trying to collect the best weapons. It's not like I had to put in a lot of work in order to do that, but okay, I can't rely on these weapons and these armors that I have upgraded fully. So it's very important for you to be strategic. And the Trial of the Sword, you have to be a smart fighter. You have to think outside the box, because you go in there, you don't have anything. So like when you, especially an example in the beginning trial, you don't have like anything, no armor or anything. You're just wearing pants, and you have to like grab a tree branch and use it to fight the bokoblins that are in that area. So again, you have to be very strategic. When you're breaking boxes in the rest area, make sure you use that wooden axe, because using the wooden axe to break open boxes, its durability won't fall as much as if you were to use a sword, which you need to attack enemies. My recommendation for the Trial of the Sword, if you're doing it, if you're not able to fight smart, if you can't think outside the box, I recommend you do a defensive buff. I didn't need to use the defensive buff until the final trial, but the defensive buff that you need to do is you need to get a 3 defensive buff for half an hour. The way you get that is you get one of the shard horns from one of the dragons. It can be Dinral, Farash, or Nadra. One of those dragons, get a shard of their horn by shooting an arrow at it. And when you do, get 3 ingredients that have a defensive buff. Add the shard of one of the add one of the horn shard from one of the dragons, put that in the meal, and that will give you a 3 defensive buff stat for half an hour. Now, I didn't need to do this in the beginning and middle trial, but for the final trial, because for how long it is, I definitely needed to, because the enemies in the final trial are a lot harder and it can be a lot unforgiving. So you want to make sure that you have that defensive buff on there so enemies can't shave off your life as easily. Because without your armor, even though you have a lot of heart, just with the sword, White Bokoblin can like take off like nearly all your hearts, like no joke. So you want to have that 3 defensive buff stat on your character Link. Now there are some side quests other than the Trial of the Sword that you can do. So the side quest is getting different armor, and I recommend that because it's really good fan service. You get Majora's Mask, you get Xant's helmet. I think you get the shirt from Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. In fact, you do. I think you get Minda's helmet. What else? You get Tingle's outfit. You get the Phantom armor. So they put in a lot of armor in the Breath of the Wild DLC Trial of the Sword, and it's really good fan service. Now, when you complete all the Trials of the Sword, you get full access to the Master Sword. You get its complete power. So it's definitely worth doing if you want the full power of the Master Sword, because as I said earlier in the video, if you haven't done the Trial of the Sword, when you're outside of Hyrule Castle, your sword is at 30, but when you're near Ganon's Malice or you're in Hyrule Castle, it goes up to 60, whereas you do the Trial of the Sword is at 60. So I definitely recommend it. The Trial of the Sword was challenging for me, especially the final trial, because it's so long. Especially when you get to the last part, the Guardians, you're going to want to know a perfect parry when you're doing the final trials. You're going to want to be able to perfect parry. And you want to make sure you save your ancient arrows when you do the final trial. When I was doing the final trial and the Trial of the Sword, I was choking. It was so long, especially the last 2 stages. I was kind of making rookie mistakes because I was so tired. It's a long time. I think the Trial of the Sword, I think the final trial in and of itself, if you don't die and start over, that's at least gonna take you, I'm gonna say, an hour and a half, maybe almost 2 hours to do that. So you definitely want to fight smart, and you want the defensive buff on that trial. The first 2 aren't so bad, but that final trial is very difficult. So I want to give you my verdict on the Trial of the Sword. To me, it deserves a 7 out of 10. Of course, the trials themselves, they were okay. I was looking really for more of a story expansion, which is the Champions Ballad, which I'll get to in a moment. But the Trial of the Sword gets a 7 out of 10. The trials were tough. And I liked the fan service they did with the armor, but as I was saying, I was looking for more story. Now going into the Champions Ballad. The Champions Ballad is really great. It starts off with you getting a message from Zelda, head back to the Shrine of Resurrection, and put the Sheikah Slate back where you found it when you woke up from the Shrine of Resurrection. When you do, a weapon appears called the One-Hit Obliterator. Now, the One-Hit Obliterator allows you to defeat an enemy with one hit, but it also works the other way around. If they touch you, you're finished off with one hit. So it's very challenging. You see 4 yellow dots pop up on your map on the Great Plateau. You have to go to each area, defeat the enemies, and when you do, a shrine pops up. You complete the shrine in all 4 areas, and when you do, you return to, I think, the Shrine of Resurrection again, or you don't. When you complete those 4 areas, those 4 shrines, the One-Hit Obliterator, 4 orbs will appear, and then they'll spread across the map. So there's one in the Lanayru region, one in the Goron region, one in the Heba region, one in the Gerudo region. And the orbs have appeared on your map, and what has shown up are obelisks. You're going to go to the obelisk at each area, and when you do, you find Cass, and Cass will give you a song about one of the champions depending on the area you're in, and he'll give you hints about trials that you must do, that the champions had to when they were tasked to becoming champions of their respective divine beast. When you go to each area to do a task, a shrine appears. You complete that shrine, you move on to the next area, and so on and so on. Then you go to the divine beast, and you go back to the divine beast. You have to fight the different Ganons again, but the difference is you're using the weapons that the champions used when they lost to the these different versions of Ganon 100 years ago. So you're using their weapons. Again, you want to fight smart because you don't want to break the durability of your weapon before it's completed. By far the toughest ones, in my opinion, are the water one and the thunder one. The thunder one is so hard because it's just so fast. But the fire one and the wind one, pretty easy to beat, like no sweat. It's the water and then the thunder one that's pretty tough. Anyway, when you defeat the different Ganons again, your champion abilities are upgraded. Now they'll recharge much faster after you have used them all up, so you don't have to wait as long. When you have completed the quest in each region, you're going to be tasked to going back with back to the Shrine of Resurrection. When you do, you're going to put your Sheikah Slate back into the pedestal, and then there's one more trial for you to do. It's another Divine Beast quest. So you know when you were playing the main game and you had to go into the Divine Beast to defeat the different versions of Ganon in order to reclaim the beast, you're doing that again, except this time you're facing a Sheikah monk. And when you finally beat him, he will reward you, I think, with your own divine beast. It's a motorcycle, and it's really cool, and it's definitely worth doing. Not just for the motorcycle, but when you defeat each Ganon again, you're going to get memories from 100 years ago. And really, it's Zelda recruiting the champions. So When you defeat Windblight Ganon again, you get Rivali's memories of when he was recruited to become a champion, and the same thing with the other respective champions. So it's definitely worth, Champions Ballad is definitely worth doing because you're getting a little bit more lore into the Breath of the Wild series. It's not a lot, you're just seeing the champions be recruited. But also when you defeat that final Sheikah monk, Cass will give you the final memory. Well, yeah, you'll remember the final memory, and that will be the champions like induction ceremony. And when you see that memory, and Cass will then give you a picture. It'll be a definitely heartwarming picture, and if you take that picture back to your house in Hateno Village, there'll be a little small cutscene where you hang it up and you're just looking at it, and it's just like so heartwarming because Link was so close to these people, and Calamity Ganon like wiped out Hyrule and all these champions are destroyed, and now it's just Link there. The world he knew like 100 years ago is gone. Everybody he knew is gone, except for Impa, Robbie, and Pura, which we'll see in Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. But for the most part, everyone he's been close to has been gone. So it's definitely a heart jerker, tear jerker when you see that. Other things you can do in the Champions Ballad, there's also more fan service armor. You can get Royal Guard armor. So also I recommend that when you're doing one of the quests in the Great Plateau with the one-hit obliterator, I definitely recommend using the Majora's Mask. That will definitely help you in the beginning part, as you can fool enemies and they won't attack you. But the Champions Ballad, I give it a 10 out of 10. It deserves that. You get more lore in the Breath of the Wild series. You get to see Zelda recruit the champions. Of course, I can understand why people would have wanted to see how Ganon destroyed Hyrule 100 years ago, but that's Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. That's going to show us that. But it gets a 10 out of 10. Because of the quest you had to do, and again, like the story, it's heartwarming, especially when you look at that final memory in that induction ceremony and they're all taking that picture together, and then Cass gives you that picture. It's definitely like a tearjerker, and it makes you like feel really bad for Link and for like what happened to Hyrule. So really good story. It is really good because a lot of people are invested in these characters and this franchise, specifically Breath of the Wild. I mean, they're invested in the Legend of Zelda franchise. They are. People have been for a very long time, but they're really invested in this Breath of the Wild series. So that's all we have for today. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Have you played the Trial of the Sword? Have you played the Champions Ballad? Have you played Breath of the Wild? If you have, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you liked what I had to share, please hit the like button, hit subscribe, share this video with all your friends, and all of you have a great day.